We understand that Nigeria's tech economy was contributing less than 1% of the GDP in 2001. Today, it's contributing over 13% to the country's GDP. And only recently, the government revealed that the Bank of Industry has approved about $20 million, a tech fund to MSMEs. And also, the Central Bank of Nigeria is offering another 90 billion naira of loans, soft loans to small-scale agric enterprises. We have this morning with us Mr. Ife Adebayo, who is the Special Assistant to the Vice President on Innovation, to shed a little more light on what these monies will be meant to achieve. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you very much, Mape.
So this huge amount of money, what is the target for the technology industry?
So the main focus is to build the tech ecosystem and help the ecosystem to contribute more to the economy. Like you had mentioned, its GDP contributions earlier. When the government first came in its first term in 2015, one of the core things that we looked at was how we can use technology as an enabler across all the various sectors of the economy to improve the output and to improve the ability of those sectors of the economy to grow, basically. The last 4 years was actually spent doing a couple of things around building a foundation. So one of the key things that was done was the national IT policy that was launched by the Honorable Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, Dr. Pantami, just a few weeks ago. Also, we had the strategic framework and implementation plan for job creation that was driven by the Office of the Vice President and was supported by development partners within that period, in which ICT was identified as one of the sectors that could spur growth across the country. So we built all those foundations looking at what the issues were. We had some specific interventions also under the Social Investment Program, for example, that was focused on human capital development, focused on support for innovation hubs, etc. So right now, the target is 4 key pillars, 4 key areas that we're looking at to now focus on. One is do more around the human capital development part of things, see how we can provide necessary skills. Second is investments. How do we provide investments and grants to companies that takes them to the point where they're then attractive to venture capitals and other investors. The third is infrastructure. How do we support workspaces for young people? How do we support innovation centers and innovation hubs across the country? While the fourth is enabling environment. You know, there's this perception about, you hear, for example, in Lagos that, oh, SARS is picking up boys with laptops. You know, software developers are sort of becoming very bothered about moving around. So how do we create an enabling environment that encourages the tech ecosystem and encourages people to get into the system and also bridges the gap between policy and what the ecosystem needs. So
where are we in the journey to this target? You mentioned capacity development, you've mentioned infrastructure, and you've also talked about laying the foundation. For instance, what does the ICT policy or the IT policy involve as launched by the Communications and Digital Economy Minister?
So the ST policy is basically looking at what the government is going to do, and the ST policy actually covers all these areas that I've spoken about before. So when you look at innovation activity across the country, in 2018, for example, tech startups raised about $180 million in investments in Nigeria. But when you look at 95% of that fund was raised by startups in Lagos. So for there to be proper economic growth, there has to be a spread of activity. So what we did was to look at, do an innovation mapping of the whole country, look at the areas where there was potential. So when you go to a place like Kaduna, there's a lot happening. You know, when you go to a place like Adamawa and Borno, there's a lot happening, but they don't have that support because there's nobody really looking at them. When you go to Port Harcourt, when you go to Enugu, you see a lot of things happening. So the target now is to pull in necessary investments, pull in necessary funds to be able to have a spread of activities across the whole country. And when you say where we are around on human capital development, there's a lot of work going on. We have organizations like Andela, for example, that is doing a lot of work. And then you find graduates from universities who studied computer engineering, computer science, who are also doing a lot. But what we're now looking at is how can we look at the skills gap, especially the global skills gap, and how can we train specifically to those specific needs of the global technology ecosystem.
Are we looking to do it within a formal system, or do we think that we need to create separate training facilities to be able to achieve that?
So one of the key things that we've done in government under President Muhammadu Buhari, and now under the leadership of Dr. Pantami, is to find the middle ground between the role of government and the role of the private sector. So on human capital development, one of the key things that we're looking at is a situation where we look at existing private sector organizations that are doing a lot within the human capital development space and technology, and how we can support them. But also look at the institutions, the universities, and look at how we can support them, because for a country as large as Nigeria, to achieve the kind of scale that we require, there is no way we can do it without involving the institutions.
Well, why are we going up all the way to the universities? Why not the secondary schools?
So the primary, secondary school level, there will be a lot of infusion at that stage also. But you know, the people from the primary and secondary school, they're still within, and they're still studying. So I'm speaking about those that were ready to start to push into the job market. However, when you look at under the social investment programs, we have the STEAM junior program, which is focused on introducing coding into schools. Just recently, the Ministry of Education and Google came to an agreement, and there was some addition of some of the technology content into the curriculum for primary education. Just a few weeks ago, the government advisor for EMEA for Google was with the vice president, and had informed the vice president of the plan to work with an innovation hub in Abuja. So I have 200 STEAM boxes spread across the country to support education in underserved areas and in unreached areas. So the primary and secondary schools are not left out of the whole equation. And I should add also that about 2 years ago, we started a conversation with the Bank of Industry around the innovation fund which was announced. And the target of that innovation fund is actually not 20 million, it's actually $500 million. So that conversation is a joint conversation of the Bank of Industry with the African Development Bank. So the African Development Bank is currently in the feasibility study stage of their own process. The Bank of Industry has their own fund, and the idea is to crowdsource this fund. So Bank of Industry has $20 million. The African Development Bank will put some money aside from its own pot also, and then we'll bring it together.
Is that what this $20 million is about?
Yeah, so that's part of what the $20 million is about.
So it's not yet readily accessible. Is that what you're saying?
So the Bank of Industry pot has been approved by the Bank of Industry board, and is accessible. That's for the Bank of Industry pot. But the African Development Bank pot is still undergoing its feasibility study process.
Okay. So for those who are looking to access this, because we understand that, I mean, it's one of the pillars which you mentioned, the fact that you want to make startups attractive to venture capitalists. But in the meantime, a lot of them complain about not being able to access funds because not a lot of banks understand their business sometimes. So for those who are looking to say this money that is now available from the Bank of Industry, what do they need to apply for it?
So there are three models that have been looked at for the fund, considered for the fund. So the first is we're going to work with existing venture capital organizations and match them. So if you fit the investment criteria of a venture capital and you need, say, $1 million, the bank is going to match the venture capital. So that way it de-risks the fund of the bank, because then the bank knows that you've gone through a certain process to be able to meet the requirements, the investment criteria for the venture capital. The second option is the direct investment within these businesses, which will also be subject to certain investment criteria. Sorry,
say the first one again. In other words, you have to have venture capitalists willing to invest in your business before the Bank of Industry will match it with whatever it is the venture capitalists are bringing.
Exactly.
Isn't that counterproductive?
No, it is not, because what you find also is that a lot of the venture capital organizations are weighing their risk. So with government coming in, government is reducing that risk. So as a venture capital, so it's two ways. As a venture capital, instead of giving you $1 million, I can now give you 500, while government gives you 500. So my risk has reduced by 50%. And also, as a startup, instead of giving equity of, say, 20% to a venture capital who will have given me $1 million, I cannot give you just 10% because I'm also getting 500 from government, which doesn't require equity.
Okay. So the second way you were talking
So the
about,
second
direct
model,
investment.
yeah, the second model is direct investment from the fund itself in the startups. With the direct investment, is the fund that's is the government innovation fund itself that is going directly into the startups. And in this, there will be various options. So there will be the option of grants for those of them who are totally at an early stage. There will be the option of equity also, which will mean giving a part of your business to the fund. And then there will be the option of debt, which means you take a loan and then you pay back at a certain period of time.
In all of this, is there a direction in which we're telling our technology companies to look? Or are we saying it doesn't matter what area you decide to take, just develop something in that for that particular area? Or do we have a focus considering the many challenges that we face as a country?
There is no specific focus, just that your business must be scalable, must be solving a local problem, and it must have the ability to be profitable, must be sustainable and profitable, must have the potentials to be sustainable and profitable. And then when you look at experience over the years, you find that traditional banks and even traditional government development finance institutions don't have the necessary expertise to identify these points, these 3 points I just laid out. And that's where the experience of the existing venture capitals and angel investors come in.
Moving forward, this is where we currently are. You talked about the business environment, which is very important. Do you think that we'll have a situation where more traditional institutions, and not the banks here, for instance, law enforcement agencies, understand the tech industry? Maybe we have an area within law enforcement that deals with the tech industry. Maybe we also have litigation lawyers who will be involved strictly with quarrels that could arise in the tech industry as well. Because you talked about the business environment, and for a number of them, they find it a real challenge. There was a time that I think they were crowdsourcing funds just to be able to, will I say, fight litigations in court against policemen who mistake software developers for Yahoo boys. How are you handling that challenge?
There is a lot of education that's going to need to be done across board. And I think one of the key issues that we have in the tech sector is that technology people are pretty smart people, and so there's this whole arrogance to government. Like, I really don't care about government. I don't need government. I can just do what I need to do and get it done on my computer. So that has to change. So the reason you have the farmers, for example, being able to extract things from governments because they come together as an association. The reason you have doctors being able to make demands, teachers, lecturers, is because they come together. So the tech ecosystem must first and foremost learn to come together and make their demands of government. On the issue of the police harassment, etc., I know Dr. Pantami has been at the forefront of this and is having engagements with the different law enforcement agencies about this. This is one of the key areas that has been very bothersome for us in government. And education, constant engagement with the law enforcement is currently ongoing on that.
What about the general improvements in the business environment? You understand that only recently certain regulatory bodies were also in a meeting with the Vice President, NAFDAC, and I think SON, and a number of them, saying that they are now ready to register tech startups which are looking to be in the food industry, etc. Are you able to measure their level of commitment? Because sometimes these things only end at word of mouth commitment. Are you able to trace, for instance, the commitments that these people make at such meetings with the experience of those who actually go to them to register?
Yes, so that's something that must be done, because beyond the commitment, what you also find over time is that it may also be a case of understanding a lot of the time for a couple of these agencies. So constant engagement with them from the ecosystem, learning how things should be done for us in the tech ecosystem as opposed to the traditional way of doing things. And I'll give a simple example. You have, for example, Standard Organization of Nigeria wanting to look at a factory and look at the basic processes for certifying the factory. But as a tech guy, I don't really have a factory. I probably have a data center. So what you're coming to look at is different. The standards you're looking for are different. So it's about education and constant engagement. It's a to and fro issue. Both the government agencies and the ecosystem must engage to find the right middle ground for this.
Let's go to Lagos now and take another guest who is on the phone. Chamberlain?
Well, yes, indeed. We do have Prince Degun Agbade. He's on the line. He's the president of the National Association of Small and Medium Scale Enterprises. Good morning, Prince, and thank you for joining us today. Well, the authorities, the government, they're putting in place some of these measures such that the MSMEs such as yours can leverage on this. Could you just tell us, how is your group, your association, positioning or leveraging, taking advantage of this initiative that the government has put in place?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ayo. It's a good news, it's a good thing that all these monies have been set aside. The first one, $20 million BOI, and $90 million for CBN. Now, to give it to the current government, the setting up is beautiful, and we've had several setups like this in the past. But the trouble is implementation. I listened to Ife just on this same program now, talking about the models of operandi. How do we execute? The trouble before now is that we have not been able to access these funds. As president of Nigerian Association of Small and Medium Enterprise, I'm privileged to be in some of the committees, and we know what the government is doing. But in the other areas, like ease of doing business, yes, we are making some impact. But in this funding, there is a lot of gap to be bridged. And I would suggest that for the execution, the one that wears the shoe knows where it pinches. They should involve the practitioners. I know it's not for only existing MSMEs, like he said, for new enterprises, all that we know. But for existing, we have not been able to access. And all this money is being set aside is beautiful, it's good. I mean, it encourages us. But execution is the issue. And like I said, if we are involved, we'll be able to suggest ways to make it more accessible.
So, sorry, Prince, if I could jump in quickly, are you suggesting that you were not involved before the authorities arrived at this decision?
No, we didn't know anything about this before they set up this. And now that they've set it up, it's a good thing. Knowing about it is the priority of government. But now, the ball should be in our court as well.
Okay.
Because you don't shave somebody's head behind him.
But Prince, now that the government has come up with this particular one, how would you suggest they approach this such that the MSMEs, the purpose for which the funds were set up, one, can indeed be utilized? I'm talking about accessibility to the funds.
Well, if I will rely on what the essay to the Vice President said this morning about administering the fund, he mentioned two categories. He said one, they would send it through existing venture capital and direct investment. All these two suggestions, each of them has separate implications. Implication on how to go about it and what are the negative things we should try and block. So, giving the money to existing venture capitalists, it has never worked. I'm not a pessimist. I'm not saying this will not work. Okay. But why was the first arrangement failed?
One moment. You are aware, of course, that you've been working with the Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency. That's a federal government agency. Isn't there a role that agency, SMEDAN, could have played in this intervention so that the members of your organization can access these facilities of government?
You are right. I agree with you. We are close to SMEDAN. Like SMEDAN is the government side of MSME in Nigeria. NASME is the private side. So the public and private in this instance must work together. So Sweden is an agency of government. Yes, and Sweden is pulling its way. And in fact, by the virtue of my position, I am a board member of Sweden. And the way things are conducted, if Sweden is brought in, Sweden is closer.
All right.
And
All right,
the
Prince.
problems.
All right, Prince Degun, we appreciate your thoughts, but we need to get to the essay so he can equally just give a word or two before we wrap up. But thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning. Markwe?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Indeed, do you want to quickly respond to what he said?
Yeah, so very quickly on SMEDAN. So SMEDAN is the Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria. However, this fund is very specific for the technology ecosystem. So that's why you will see, for example, as part of the administration of the fund, the National Information Technology Development Agency is very active.
That's NITDA.
That's NITDA, yes. And NITDA has been involved in the process to the build-up of the fund. Also, he mentioned engagement with the ecosystem. Before the setup of this fund, one of the key things that we did spend the whole of November and December doing was actually stakeholder engagements. So we spent a lot of time speaking to stakeholders on the phone and actually visiting specific stakeholders in Lagos, in Abuja, in Kaduna, in Anambra, all over the country. So stakeholder engagement has been very key. And I think because this is very tech-focused, maybe that's why the president of NASME is not aware of a couple of these things.
Okay, well, we have to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us this morning and shedding a little more light on how to access this $20 million tech fund for MSMEs. Ife Adebayo is Special Assistant to the Vice President on Innovation. Thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, that's where we leave it on the program this morning. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
Yes, I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I know some people are making plans to access that fund.
Yeah.
I'm Karaoke Kill.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.